Welcome back to another episode of the Way of BJJ podcast. I'm Minju, and I'm here to wish you a Merry Christmas. Before we get to the podcast, did you know we have a Way of BJJ app? We designed this app to be a revolutionary way for you to organize Jiu-Jitsu and to consume Jiu-Jitsu content. If you're in North America, go to the App Store, download the app, check out all the free stuff that we have in there, and let us know what you think. Now, let's get to the episode.
Okay, here we are.
Here we are.
Yeah, getting started is always like the most awkward.
It is what it is.
Dude, man,
Let's just dive right in.
I know. I'm so thankful for your time, man. Yeah, because this is like, I don't know if you like to be called a legend or whatever, because I almost feel like, hey, you know what, I ain't dead yet.
I won't say I won't like it. I don't like it, you know? Yeah, thank you.
There you go. So definitely, in my mind, pioneer, legend, and everything.
Appreciate that.
Dennis Kang right here. Yeah, and right in our backyard too, you know?
Right, yeah. Vancouver.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So I think the first thing I do want to ask you is, because in most of the podcasts, right, people go right into like, hey, what have you accomplished? You know, when you gone through your 22 fight unbeaten streak, blah, 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 all those things, right? But nobody ever asks you, how is Denis Kang? How you been? What's going on right now? How
Really
are you
good,
doing?
man. Yeah, so, I mean, I had my last fight in 2012, and I've been focusing on coaching since then, you know, kind of all over the world. And then just recently, I found my footing in Vancouver, particularly in Richmond at the Pinnacle MMA.
Which is where we're at right now.
Which is where we're at right now, that's right. And I'm trying to make it grow here. We've got a solid team of MMA fighters, BJJ competitors, and just all around people who enjoy mixed martial arts, you know?
Yeah, so what is because I know a lot of people have a hard time adjusting and transitioning out of the athletic competition life, right? So how was that transition for you?
It was a little tough at first, but luckily I've always been fond of coaching. You know, my mother was a teacher, so I think that was a little bit in my blood, and I had that to fall back on. You know, I started teaching before I stopped fighting. I always felt like I was a natural, you know, sharer and giver of knowledge, right? And so when I made the transition from active competitor to not competing anymore and wanting to find something else, it was the natural progression for me.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, and I'm also wondering, like, how do you know when to stop? You know, because we see so many people, like, they just keep on going, you know, or they retire, they come back out, and then it's almost always end really badly, right?
Right.
So what was your thought process?
Well, I'll say this. If you're questioning yourself and wondering whether you should stop or keep going, it's probably time to stop, you know, because if you're starting to have those doubts in your head, I mean, this is what I told a fighter who just asked me that same question. He said to me, he goes, I'm not that motivated anymore. Do you think I should keep going, or should I just stop? You know, I kind of feel like I'm wussing out a little bit. I said, this is not basketball. You don't have to score points with a ball. You know, the sport is not forgiving. You know, you take hits to the head. If you're not 100% into it, it can be very dangerous. So better to back off, and you can come back later if you feel like you're maybe burnt out and you just need to take a temporary break. And if not, then you don't, you know, but at least you went out of your own free will. You didn't get punched out, so to speak, you know, you didn't get your injured out of the sport, right?
Yeah. So they wouldn't sanction any more fights for you, right? You know, you don't want
to exactly. You know, people don't even want to put you on the card because it's just, you know, you don't want to be at that point.
Yeah. But I guess as a coach, it's probably a little bit different, right? Because I think in your case, you could have stopped when you lost to Jason Miller, right? Because I think you even thought yourself about stopping, right?
That was a long time ago, yeah.
Right,
so that was different. I was still young, but you're right. I think it was like I had a bunch of losses back then, and I was just sick of losing, and because I was really trying. I would train so hard for these fights, and then when it was time to compete, I wasn't the same. I was a little bit just hard on myself, tense in the fight. You know, I didn't live up to the same standards that I'd accomplished in training. So when I would lose, it was just very discouraging. You know, and you're right. After the Jason Miller fight, like I really had to dig deep, and thankfully, my coach, Marcus Suarez, and my friends and, my team, my coaches and training partners kept me in the game. But also, I had already signed for another fight after. So I kind of was stuck and I had to do that. And I told myself, well, I'll just do this fight and then I'll finish. And I ended up winning that fight. And then it just kind of kept going from there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So because from your personal experience, so it sounds like as a coach, you also have to kind of walk that tightrope, right? If somebody is thinking about quitting, not because they don't have potential, but because of a lack of confidence or whatever,
right,
then you would have to kind of talk to them differently. Then,
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. As a coach, I've been in that same situation, except with fighters of mine that had lost or that were feeling discouraged after. And I drew from those same experiences that I've had. And I was able to speak from their heart and from, having lived it. And I think it made it a little bit more authentic and real to them, right? Because I told them, when I was in your shoes, I felt like such and such way, like you feel now, but I kept going, and then I had to change certain things. But from then on, I turned it around. So I'm showing it to them from experience, living proof, literally, that you can turn yourself around after going on a streak, a losing streak, or just losing one fight.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Because what is really interesting to me, like how do you feel like if you had like more? Did they have like amateur fights and all that kind of stuff? Like,
not when I was fighting.
Just like,
no, it was all basically pro level.
Right. So do you think it would have been different if you can like do amateur fights and everything, just kind of get the jitters out and then go into pro?
Yeah, I mean, I did some jiu-jitsu matches.
Right.
I did a lot of jiu-jitsu matches. So in a way, that prepared me for MMA. But you got to remember, when I had my first MMA fight, the word MMA did not even exist. It was called no holds barred or extreme fighting, So
cage fighting.
Yeah, that's right.
Human cockfighting.
That's right. Yeah, literally. It was an illegal underground fight in Richmond, actually, and it was no gloves, and I think it was a time limit. It was like a 10-minute fight, 10-minute round, one 10-minute round.
Oh, wow.
But you could grab hair, you could elbow, you could headbutt, all that stuff. Yeah.
Nice. So you can see red, and then body just hits the floor.
I mean, yeah. I just remember putting Vaseline in my hair so that the opponent would not grab my hair and just hockey fight me. Right. I was afraid to be grabbed by the hair and just fed punches like that.
Man, that's such a different time.
Wow,
right?
so different
times.
Yeah.
So, do you think, because this is a BJJ show, by the way, and I know that you talk about your Pride fighting days and Spirit MC fighting days and UFC days quite a bit. So I actually do want to ask you about something that I haven't heard you talk about that much, which is you were in the ADCC 2003.
Yep, that's right.
Which was a legendary year, by the way. Yep. Right, with the Marcelo Garcia just coming out of nowhere, choking everybody out. Yep. With Eddie Bravo having this big, coming out party.
I saw that. Yeah.
With Dean Lister.
It was an amazing event. Yeah. He won the absolute.
I won the absolute. Just by jumping in last minute.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right.
I could go on, but that was a legendary.
John Olavinemo, he was amazing. Marcelo Garcia. Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah. Wow. So.
Yeah, people forget that I have a BJJ background.
Because
I started in that.
Because you are a BJJ.
That's right.
Guy,
black belt under Marcus Suarez.
Yeah.
I started off with jiu-jitsu with the gi, from white to black belt. And that year that I went to ADCC, I won the Canadian ADCC trials in Ontario. I beat 3 people, some very good competitors. And then from there, I got invited to win.
Just gonna adjust this a bit so the mic is pointing up. There you go. Here you go. Yeah, we're doing this for you so we get better audio. Let's go.
So from there, after winning the Canadian trials, I was invited to do the North American trial, which was in San Diego.
Wow, you have to win 2 trials.
Yeah, I know. It doesn't make sense anymore, but back then that's how it was. So I went to San Diego, and I had a fight the weekend after the San Diego trials. So I wasn't going to do it. I thought that it was enough to win the Canadian trials, but my coach made me do it, and I was like, okay, fine. So I flew down to San Diego, won my first match against, I think it was Angelo Popovsky, and then the second match was against the winner of the trials, David Terrell, and I lost to him on points, but he was tough, but we had a really heated, close match. He was tough.
Yeah, both of you ended up going, right?
That's right. Yeah. They ended up inviting me anyways, which was amazing. Miguel Iturrate was awesome. He's the one who flew me in. He was one of the promoters and organizers for the event, and it was a great experience. I had one match. I lost by points to Reese Andy, but again, it was really close. Like he was a really good wrestler, I ended up taking him down, but it was in no time period, no point period. And then he ended up taking me down in the point period. Yeah, it was a tough match. It's really hard because it was super hot in Brazil.
Right.
And we were just sweating. No shirt, just like, it was almost like oil wrestling, you know? Like we were
Everybody
just
felt greasy.
very hard to get a grip of someone.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So, when did you feel like, I mean, I guess, how do you know that you are gonna be able to compete at that level? What was your jiu-jitsu journey like?
Well, I always knew, like, again, like I said, the jiu-jitsu is what I started with, so I always had confidence in my jiu-jitsu. Like, that was the thing. I could compete. I knew I could compete at any level, and I also did the Worlds in 2000 when it was still in Brazil, when I was a purple belt. And I trained for about 2 months at the Carlson Gracie Academy, and then did the Worlds, and won 2 matches, and then lost 2, but I did really, really good. I fought against tough opponents, and back then the Worlds was just insane. I mean, it's still big to this day, but back then when it was in Brazil, at this place called the Tijuca Tennis Club, it was just insane. Like, you had rival schools in the stands just chanting the songs of their teams, raising flags. It was, you had the Brazilian passion and intensity.
Like going to an American football game.
Oh, exactly, exactly. Or a Brazilian football or soccer
or
game.
soccer
It
game,
was insane. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and so I knew that I was at that level. Like I said, I always had confidence in my jiu-jitsu. I probably did, before the ADCC match, I probably had like 75, 80 jiu-jitsu matches, So, yeah.
Yeah, so it's safe to say then Canadian or Vancouver Jiu-Jitsu was already at a pretty good level at that point?
Yeah, I would say, definitely.
Nice. Yeah. And since then until now, what kind of evolution and change have you been seeing in the jiu-jitsu world?
Lots. I mean, now it's a completely new game. It's just from the progression in leg locks, and then with the berimbolo, and then just things like that. The style has completely changed. It used to be. You were either a top fighter, a guard player, or top fighter, Now it's different, You have guys that are super agile, specialists at taking the backs, sweeps, leg locks, The sport just changes completely. I think it's not just the way that people compete and fight, it's the way that the sport is taught now, right? I think the first person to really codify the jiu-jitsu is Eddie Bravo. He gave names to techniques that people could remember. Yeah, things like that.
Douchebag.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird, but it works because people remember it easier. Before that, every move had like 2 or 3 different names depending on where you learned it, what instructor, what country, And with Eddie Bravo, it was much easier to learn. It was like a structured system that anybody could kind of pick up and be decent at, or even better than decent. And then with John Danaher, who took it to like the university professor level and really breaking down the sport and explaining the different concepts and really researching, it was amazing. It really brought it to, and now everybody's trying to teach like that. Just really explore and explain certain concepts. I mean, they break it down to really, really fine points, and it's different than before. Before it was a lot more broad, right? A lot more just less specific, really.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So speaking of Eddie Bravo, let's bring it back to the 2003 ADCC, right? So what was the atmosphere like back then? Because we know that in recent years, ADCC has gone through this. I don't know, renaissance or however you want to call it. It's being pushed to the next level right now. Right? So what was it like back then?
It was intense. I mean, there's a couple things happened that year at that ADCC. Eddie Bravo, he beat Hoyler by triangle, which was insane.
And you were there, right?
I was there. I saw it, man.
You're like,
I'm pretty sure Eddie Bravo was in my locker room too, because everybody had different locker rooms. Also in my locker room was Marcelo Garcia.
Right.
And before
nobody knew who he was.
Nobody knew. Okay, first I see him in my locker room, and I see him literally. This is how he was. He was sitting against the wall with his knees wrapped to his chest like this, biting his nails. And I look at him and I go, this must be someone's little brother. Like, literally, that's why, no offense, Marcelo, like, he's the GOAT. I don't want to disrespect him, but that's what I thought then.
But everybody starts somewhere.
Later, I see him, he's beating Shaolin. And then after that, he's beating first he beat Henzo, then he beat Shaolin, choked him unconscious. Like, it was insane. He just came out of nowhere and just, here I am, man, I'm a killer. And then Jeff Munson was not happy with the decision, strips naked, takes off his shorts, throws them, and he's in the middle of the arena, throws them at the judges and walks back to the tunnel. And it was a long walk. That was insane. Jeff is a good friend of mine. I love him, but that was funny. Yeah. The place went nuts.
Oh my God.
Needless to say.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. I guess those you probably have like tons of those stories, just from that event.
Yeah. It was pretty funny. The weigh-ins. Speaking of Eddie Bravo, at the weigh-in. So remember, there was a lot more MMA guys back then in ADCC. It was literally a who's who of BJJ and MMA, like UFC basically. And Eddie Bravo was there with Joe Rogan at the weigh-ins. Eddie Bravo's completely naked, just walking around, talking to people. Hey, how you doing? Just waiting to be called out to get, because you got to step on the scale to get weighed in. Eddie Bravo was just bare, just in the wind.
It's all right. That's how confident he was.
Hey, I guess, yeah, I guess, some type of way, yeah.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. So spectator-wise, was it on? Was it a?
It was packed, yeah. A lot of people screaming, chanting, the Brazilian chant, "Ooh, va pegar, Jiu-Jitsu," because there was also Luta Livre representative, Cacareco.
Right.
Again, he did really well.
The cool thing about ADCC is it's not a jiu-jitsu competition.
No.
It's a submission grappling.
That's right.
competition
That's right.
from all
It's almost
styles.
more wrestling-y,
Right.
Yeah. So, but that's what makes it special and different,
Right.
It's not just jiu-jitsu. You're right. It's it's a little bit more. I don't want to say more wrestling-centric, but it does have a wrestling-centric part.
Yes,
Right.
for
So
sure.
it kind of evens it out. It's good.
Yeah. So after that experience, have you ever thought about going back there, or what did you think that was it? You're like, hey, I made it to ADCC. I'm gonna focus on MMA.
I still did a couple grappling competitions. What did I do? I did when I was at American Top Team, I won a NAGA, and I won not an ADCC but an ADCC sanctioned competition. But that's it, really. I was always busy training for MMA fights,
right.
So yeah.
Do you think things might have played out differently if you started later now that you're seeing grappling has more avenues to make a career out of?
Yeah, it might have been, because when what you brought up earlier is when I almost stopped fighting, is in my mind I was gonna get a better job, get a good job, and just focus on jiu-jitsu and just do competition and forget this MMA bullshit, But it didn't work out like that. But that is what I was gonna do in my mind, because I still love martial arts.
Right.
It was just the competition aspect that was a little bit hard on me, so intense, So,
Yeah, because I know, because people say jiu-jitsu is hard, but MMA is way harder. Yeah.
MMA is hard, man. MMA is really hard. It's not just hard sparring. It's also just time management. There's so many different things that you have to train on, And fighters nowadays are blessed with having a ready-made blueprint on how to fight.
Right.
I mean, when I was training, I know it sounds cliched, but back in my day, nobody really knew how to train properly because the sport had not been around that long. So most people, they had their way that worked for them, and then that's it. I mean, I don't know why I just did it. That's just how I did it, right? Nobody tells you how to do it.
Right.
And people were still going around from gym to gym, from boxing gym to wrestling gym to kickboxing gym to learn new things, right?
Yeah.
Nowadays, I mean, fighters, can be a little bit more organized, train safer, smarter. There's a lot of things that I did wrong just because I didn't know any better, right? It was learning by trial and error.
Yeah. So how has jiu-jitsu in MMA changed throughout the last decades or so?
Well, now I think to be successful in MMA, you have to have a combination of wrestling and BJJ, especially against the fence. It's almost like a separate style in itself. Keeping the opponent down and trying to get up off the bottom on the fence. I mean, being on the fence, that's a whole new level of jiu-jitsu, because jiu-jitsu is either you're on the floor or standing.
Right.
There's no in between. There's no on the fence unless you're training in the gym, and you got a wall and you just happen to keep going. But if you're talking about strictly competition, it's just on a flat surface. In MMA, you got the vertical part, when you're leaning on the wall. So that adds a whole new level right there. Number two, you're shirtless, so it's very slippery. And number three, you have gloves. So it makes grips a lot harder, like 10-finger grip, locking your hands together and gable grips or any kind of grips is a lot more difficult because your hands are thicker because of the glove. That's why in MMA, when we train, if you're training for a fight, I always make my fighters do jiu-jitsu with the gloves on because it changes the way you grip, and you will have to adapt. If you only do jiu-jitsu without gloves, and then when it comes to fight time, you're trying to grip something and it's very different, you won't know how to do it. It'll throw you off. And one of the worst things that can happen to you in an MMA fight is to be thrown off and to be caught by surprise. So to get back to your question, what has changed in BJJ for MMA is the wall wrestling. The addition of that. People now specialize in that. Guys like Khabib, who just specialize in pinning you against the wall, taking you down, wrapping your legs with the triangling their legs over your legs, and then just feeding you ground and pound. You do still have some specialists who just take you down and just submit you or ground and pound you like in the old days, but we haven't seen one since Damian Maia, really. There really isn't anybody like that anymore. It just kind of seems to be fading out. Yeah, that's how it is right now.
Yeah, for sure. I know. It's as a jiu-jitsu guy, pure. I only train jiu-jitsu. It does get frustrating sometimes. There's not one person flying the jiu-jitsu flag anymore, right? Usually, as you said, Damian Maia.
Yeah.
He got so close to the top, but never.
That's right.
Never quite made it. Right?
Yeah, but he was special though. Yeah. Like his jiu-jitsu was something else. It was amazing.
Yeah, and then you see multiple time world champions from jiu-jitsu trying MMA, and then fight a few times, and then leave with their tails tucked between their legs, right?
That's right. You're thinking of Rodrigo, right? Rodolfo Vieira.
Rodolfo
Vieira, yeah. But then there's guys like Burns.
They won fight.
I know. I fought on the same card as him.
Oh, nice.
We fought in Korea together, yeah.
All right.
But anyways, guys like Burns who do really well. Leo Santos did really well. They do really good. But some guys Jacare, but some guys they can't get it. It's a different sport.
Yeah, I wouldn't say Vieira is not doing well, but why does he gas out so quickly?
I don't know. He's just so, I think a lot of it is the tension. He makes himself gas out from what I've seen, I think a lot of the conditioning for MMA, here's the thing about MMA that's different for Jiu-Jitsu. It's a lot more intense and stressful. There's way more adrenaline because you have somebody trying to take your head off. It's not like Jiu-Jitsu where you can be relaxed and chill. I mean, yes, BJJ can be intense and close to a real fight with guys that are super aggressive, but for the most part, you don't have to worry about getting hit. But in MMA, it's very intense, unless you're doing combat jiu-jitsu, which I think is awesome. Right?
Yeah. I know. A lot of people hate it for some reason.
Oh, really? Yeah. No, man. I would have loved to have it back in the day.
I see a lot of comments, people say, if you're just going to, slap fight on the ground, just do MMA. Why don't
It's not slaps. It's palm strikes. Slaps is this.
Right.
Palm strikes is...
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like the heel of the palm.
Let Boss Rutan hit you with one of those.
My first few matches, I
did pancrase.
Yeah, yes. I did pancrase, but it was close fist. But when I fought in Colorado in an event called the Boss Rutan Invitational, it was
the one you had to pay for yourself to get in.
That's right. Yeah, good, very good. Yeah, good research. I had to do kickboxing standing up, and on the ground was palm strikes only, and I used the heel of my palm to smash the guy.
Yeah. So in a way, isn't it a little safer than using your fist and breaking your hand?
It is. It's safer for you. I don't think it's much safer for the other guy. I think you get less cuts, but you can get just as many concussions. Because the heel of the palm is really hard.
Right. So why is that technique not used?
It doesn't look as cool. Okay. You won't get, I don't know. Yeah, you're right. It could be.
Or maybe you sacrifice reach or something?
Maybe, yeah. I don't know. I don't know why people don't use it. Punch is probably better. You can, just the way you can torque into it, you get more velocity behind it. The heel palm, it's more for stunning the guy, I guess,
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so because since we're on the topic of jiu-jitsu and MMA, right? So when you are teaching jiu-jitsu right now, do you think about them differently? Do you go like, hey, you know what, why do we even train these moves that's actually not going to be effective in a real fight? Do you think that way, or do you feel like, hey, you know what, it's a completely different sport, we're still going to do it because it's fun?
No, I don't think like that, because I think, the average person is smart enough to take advantage of jiu-jitsu in what works in a fight, and as opposed to pulling butt scoot in a street fight, like, come on, nobody would do that. I mean, it doesn't take common sense to know what works and what doesn't in a street fight. Uh, I try to stay up to date with jiu-jitsu, with all the new changes and the new additions of moves and trends and stuff like that. But I always keep a very strong focus on top position and passing, right? But I still adapt, and we focus on certain areas that, other like things like leg locks and butterfly guard and things like that, right? We do a lot of that still. Even though like it's not something that you'd use in a street fight, but it doesn't matter. It'll still teach you good attributes. All of jiu-jitsu, I think, will teach you, good things that can maybe indirectly apply to a street fight. If anything, just movement, just
Right.
agility, just, positional awareness, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. So in the current jiu-jitsu landscape, with all the newest meta and everything you've been keeping up with, right? So are you approaching teaching complete beginners like differently? So let's say 5, 6 years ago.
A little bit. I mean, I think I definitely don't like. I always give them a choice if they want to roll right away. Like if it's a brand new person, because some people, they've never even wrestled on their own. They've never even seen a wrestling match, so they have no idea what to do. So that can be dangerous. So I always give them a chance to watch. Whereas before it was more like just like everybody rolls. No matter what. And then if they want to roll right away, then I let them also. And then as far as technique, then the first thing usually when somebody comes is I'll teach them balance on their knees. You know what I mean? How to not so they can keep their balance on their knees, but how to learn to shift their weight. Okay. Number 2, it's shrimping and moving off the bottom, using your feet to push and create space. I think that's important. You have to learn how to move yourself. And then after that comes submissions and more concepts of which position are more advantageous for you.
Gotcha.
Right? Yeah.
So you're saying the universal concept that's always going to be true, right? Such
Right.
as the movement.
That's right.
Right.
Balance, shifting your weight, active posting, and good strong posture, having your head on over your hips, kind of thing. And then on the bottom, just pushing off the ground, getting underhooks, shrimping, things like that, bridging.
Nice.
Yeah. I always add a little bit of wrestling concepts, like bridging and controlling the head.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, because again, we're still talking about jiu-jitsu and
Yeah.
MMA and stuff, right? Because something I just thought of, it's the how they're doing some bare knuckle MMA nowadays.
Yeah, I saw it. I just saw it. I think George Masvidal just put on
Yeah.
an event. Yeah, Hector Lombard fought in it.
Yeah. So then without the gloves, then does that make it easier to use jiu-jitsu then? You think?
Yeah, I would actually, because it's easier to use your grips, right?
Right.
It also makes it a little bit, they say it'll make it safer in terms of concussions because you can't hit as hard because you'll break your hands. So I know there are some people that are really like in the CTE field or against CTE. They're really advocating for no holds, bare knuckle MMA or bare knuckle boxing because people can't hit as hard, so
Right.
there's less impact on the brain and the head, right? So I don't know because I haven't done it. I have done bare knuckle MMA, but I won the fight super fast, so I never really even got hit. I hit the guy myself,
Yeah, that's
but I don't
probably
know how he was.
That's
Yeah,
probably why it was a super fast fight.
yeah, exactly,
The other guy.
exactly. Yeah,
Nice. All right. So you're 46 now?
Yeah.
Yeah, 46. Yeah. So and I know it doesn't sound very old, which is not. I'm 44, but you have way more, mileage on your
Right.
body than most people your
Yep.
age, right? So I think a question I do want to ask you is what are your thoughts on longevity, recovery, and all that? Because I think I heard on another podcast you're saying that you were having some issues with with your hips, with your back,
Right.
and that you're not able to train.
I
as much
had
as you would
issues
like
with
to.
my hip. No,
Yeah.
I definitely, as you get older, you have to change your training habits. And I mean, everybody's different, you know. For me, in my case, I've already had a long career, a very, very intense physical career. The training was very rough on the body. So there's no way I can train like I used to. You know, everybody always asks me, would you still want to fight? Of course, I'd love to fight, but there's no way I'd like to go through the training. There's no way I could go through the training. My body just cannot hold up to the impact. You know, I can't even really roll hard anymore. You know, I've had a lot of surgeries. I've had like 8 surgeries, hip replacement, 2 torn biceps, broken hands, bursa, dislocated shoulders. You know, a lot of things. So I mean, if I roll too hard, I'm either super sore and I can't walk for a couple of days, or if I roll even more and push through it, I'll get some kind of injury, and then I won't even be able to teach. You know. So what I do is I stay in touch with jiu-jitsu. I watch a lot of jiu-jitsu, and I still get my reps in. I still do the reps with the students. I teach the jiu-jitsu, which also makes me do reps.
Right.
And so that keeps me in the game. You know. And I still love jiu-jitsu,
Right.
you know. I'm very active in coaching my students. I go to tournaments with them. I watch them in the sparring, you know. We like to break it down to the finest details of the jiu-jitsu, you know. I do the same thing with MMA, but the jiu-jitsu is a separate part, right? Especially nowadays, there's a lot more competition than before, right? So I try to push my students to compete as much as they can. I always say one competition is almost like 3 months of training. Like you will get better after a competition, no matter if you win or you lose. You could have one match, lose it, and then come back next week and you will feel better than the previous week. It's just how it is. It's not just about the match itself. It's also about being there, seeing other people compete, seeing people better than you compete, seeing what you should be doing, you know, just from seeing more advanced guys, right? There's just different ways to get better in jiu-jitsu.
For sure. Yeah, so if you could go back in time and change a few things about how you approach training, what would you change?
I would definitely do, for the MMA part, I would do more small glove sparring. I didn't do that much of that when I was in MMA just because it just was not a thing. You would do sparring with big gloves only. You would do boxing or kickboxing.
Yeah,
right?
that's kind of weird. It's kind of like telling people to train in the gi for no gi.
Yeah, I don't know. We just didn't do it. We would do small glove training, but we would do jiu-jitsu with small gloves, not striking with small gloves. Even at American Top Team, we were starting to do it at the end that I was there, but not that much. Now it's all we do, like everywhere, you know. And then for jiu-jitsu, I think I would do a little bit more no-gi stuff, like because I did a lot of gi. And I would somehow just take off the gi top when I had a fight, but most of my training was with gi. You know, even for no gi competitions, right? People just didn't train in no gi that much, right? It wasn't a thing like it is now, right? So,
Yeah. I would like to talk about that a bit more because it seems like the same argument is making a comeback, right? Because we all know that that's a big thing back in the early 2010s or whatever, right? When Eddie Bravo was the advocate for, hey, you gotta train no-gi.
Yeah, don't wear pajamas,
right?
you know? Yeah.
And then somehow people came around to that idea. But then in recent years, I'm seeing the other side coming back saying, no, you know, you have to train the gi to make it more technical. So for somebody who has actually been through the entire cycle, tell those people why do you know?
I think they both complement each other.
Right.
You have to train the gi to make your no gi better, but you got to train no gi to make your gi better. I mean, I think you got to do both. The gi is a little bit slower. You know, there's way more technique in it, way more grips. You know, especially today. And then no gi is a little bit faster. You know, there's things that you can get away with in no gi that you can't get away with in gi, and vice versa, right? I think, though, it is up to the individual. Like, people got to find out for themselves what they want to do.
Gotcha.
You know?
So do you think there are merits to training in the gi if the person only wants to compete in ADCC style type of competitions?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think for sure a little bit.
Okay.
Right? Like, if you only want to do something different, because, I mean, remember, like, your training can get a little bit stale sometimes, right? So sometimes you want to do something a little different. You know, put on the gi. Vice versa with gi athletes. You know, take off the jacket sometimes and just go no gi or just go in your shorts.
Yeah, so it's almost like using the environment for constraint-based kind of training.
Right. That's right. That's right. Take yourself out of your comfort zone because if you've never trained gi, it's hard. It's first of all, it's hot in a gi. It's hard to breathe. Number two, when somebody gets on top of you and that lapel is in your face, like, man, you're lost in all that cloth.
It depends on the fabric. Some are so rough.
Yeah, that's right. It is like a double weave. It's very chafing, you know? Yeah,
And
it's
then some-
different.
and
You
some
can
people-
rip your nails, right?
Some people don't wash the gi.
Yeah, oh.
That's the fucking worst.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. So what about, are you training more in the gi nowadays or more in no gi?
We do both right now.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm training no gi and gi. I am seeing the popularity of no gi go a little bit higher, you know, just with it just seems like there's a little bit more of a focus on it in the social media that I see, you know, with guys like Gordon Ryan. There seems to be more superstar in no gi, like it's on Fight Pass and stuff, you know.
Right.
And in the gi, it seems to be a little bit more of a niche. I think no gi is a niche, but like gi is like the niche within the niche, you know. And it's too bad, but it's just the way it's evolving. I mean, it's not that bad. It's still jiu-jitsu. You know what I mean? So it could be worse. You know, neither could be popular.
True.
But I mean, if you had to pick it's better. I would rather pick just one than having to pick none at all. You know? So it is what it is.
What about from your own personal spectator preference standpoint? Which one do you prefer to watch?
I prefer to watch no-gi, personally, yeah. And I prefer to train in no-gi as well, you know? It's just faster, and I did more no-gi later on, but I still respect and love the gi, because that's what I started in, you know? I went from white to black belt in the gi, you know? I started off competing in the gi, you know? So it's always going to have a strong place in my heart, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Nice. Good. Yeah, so then I think there's another interesting thing I do want to ask you about as well.
Sure.
Right? So recently, The Rock was on the Joe Rogan
Oh, yeah.
podcast.
Yeah, I was listening to it today. Yeah.
So something caught my ears when he said that back in 1997, he was thinking about going to. Did you hear that part? He said he was thinking about going to Japan and fighting Pride because there was no money in WWE.
Oh, I haven't heard that yet. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Wow.
that's what he said. He's like, yo, back in 1997, I was talking to Ken Shamrock and those guys to see, you know, if I can go to Pride because
Wow.
and he said he heard those people are making like 350 grand, you know, $500,000, you know, and all things like that. So if that's the case, then MMA pay has gone backwards a lot, you know. But is that really the case back then?
I don't think. I think he would have gotten paid like that, maybe because he's The Rock. I don't think everybody.
That was 97. That nobody.
I
knew
don't
who he
think.
was.
I don't think there was Pride in '97. First of all.
Right. I think the first one was 98 or
Yeah,
something.
yeah. I think it was later. I think it was like, was it '98? It might have been
99,
'99.
yeah.
Yeah. I think it got a little bit inflated. You know. I don't think people. I think some people were making maybe in the six figures, but not everybody.
Yeah.
Right. Depends who you were, and MMA pay has gone backwards. No, definitely not. I think it's gone up for some people. For like the superstar, they're making in the millions now. I want to bring up names like Conor McGregor, but he's a very specific and special case. I
Right.
mean, he was smart the way he branded himself and the way he built his empire. You know, multifaceted, right, with the whiskey and things like that. It's not just from fighting, but if you want to talk with money and just pure fighting, it has gone up a little bit, but it's still not enough.
Yeah,
you
but
know?
is it keeping up with inflation? That's the question.
I don't think it has. I don't think it
so.
has. Like
I don't think anything has.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. Entry level pay for UFC is, I think, if I'm being generous, I think it's 20 and 20, and I don't even think it's that. I think I've heard it's still 10 and 10. So, I mean, but it's up to you to market yourself as a brand and to be interesting to the spectators, you know. Winning is not enough anymore, especially with social media, but you do have a bigger avenue to do that. Like when I was fighting, man, there was no social media like today. There was MySpace, that's it, right? There was MSN Messenger. Right. Nowadays, it's so much easier, right? You have way more social media. It's way easier to build like a strong following for yourself.
I think the point where social media, it actually matters more than mainstream media nowadays, you know.
It does.
Yeah.
You're right. People believe it more,
Right.
like especially young people. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. So out of all the different fight promotions you have competed for, right? Which one holds the most special place in your heart?
it would be Pride for sure. There will never be anything like it. You know, just the energy backstage and in the fight itself, just, you know, with the music, it was something so special. It was amazing. When the event would start and the drums, those Japanese taiko drums would start to beat and that music would start to play so loud, they would line us up backstage because in Japanese MMA events, you have to be presented and introduced to the crowd,
Yeah,
right?
like
So
a
they would
crazy
call
lane.
us, yeah, exactly. They would call us up one by one. Lenny Hart would announce us. And so before you walk out, you're lined up backstage in a place where nobody can see you, and you're literally right behind the speakers. And those drums are just playing so loud. Everybody's tense, waiting to be called out. You're not fighting yet. You're not fighting for like 2 hours, but it almost feels like it.
Oh man, so
You
your
know?
adrenaline is already like already shot up, and then you had the
Yeah.
adrenaline dump already.
For me, the
before
way
the
I would
fight.
see it, I would see it like a practice walkout. I would pretend it was a fight,
Nice.
you know, and walk out just in the zone, you know, and then you got to go backstage, calm yourself down again. That was fine, and then start warming up and fight an hour or two later or whatever it was, right?
Nice.
Yeah. So Pride was definitely
Pride is
special. Yeah.
definitely special, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they because they don't do that anymore. You know, multiple fights in one night. You know? Yeah.
No.
So
I think it was too hard. Tournaments were really cool and really fun, but it really didn't make sense. Not with the nature of the sport. I mean, if it's a volleyball tournament or something like that,
even
okay.
jiu-jitsu makes sense. You know?
Yeah, even jiu-jitsu makes more sense. But with something as rough and unpredictable as MMA, I mean, just injuries, cuts, you know, broken bones. I mean, look at me in the finals of the Pride tournament. I tore my bicep in the first match.
Right.
Paulo Filho, you know, hurt his knee, then come back, right? Like anything could happen.
Yeah.
You know, so it's hard. It's hard to keep a consistent like story, because that's what a tournament is for the audience. It's a story.
Right.
That's why winning it is so important, because you're the hero of that
Yeah, so
story.
it almost makes no sense to have
Exactly.
the main characters not even reach
Right.
the finals because
It
of
leaves you
injury.
hanging.
And then
That's right.
somebody who lost comes back in just because
Right.
they're not injured. You know?
Yeah,
it
that's
makes no
it.
sense. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
So speaking of which, I think there's for jiu-jitsu in terms of jiu-jitsu, right? Because there's this guy, very interesting cat, who's rest in peace, Armin Sulev.
Amar Sulov.
Arman
Yeah.
Sulev, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so he's a very interesting guy that you
Yeah.
fought, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So the reason why I think in the his name it's more famous in the jiu-jitsu zeitgeist nowadays.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's because of his move, the
Sulev choke.
stretch.
Sulev stretch.
Yeah, the
Right.
Sulev
Right.
stretch,
Right.
Yeah. So remember in the last in the ADCC trials
Right.
a couple years ago,
Right.
then this guy, I think Josh Cisneros, hit
Okay.
like 2 of those
Really?
in the trials, and then everybody was talking about, oh, what is this?
So
What is this?
Sulev made up that move?
That's
Wow.
what
Yeah,
I
he
researched
must
on
have.
him.
Yeah. Good for him.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
who else is
Right,
named
that's
Sulev?
right.
That's
Hey,
kinda
he was
famous.
a badass, that guy. He was tough. And let me tell you, I was supposed to fight him 2 times. The first time I went to Russia and I fought his teammate, Andrei Semenov, and the whole time he was staring at me backstage.
You knew you
Before
guys-
the fight and after the fight. He was just like, and I fought Semenov to a draw, but I thought I beat him, but it doesn't matter anyways. And he was looking at me and he was like, doing this, just nodding up and down, like he was assessing me, like, okay, this guy's got something. And then I saw him, I was supposed to fight him again the next year in Russia, and he ended up pulling out because he got contracted to Pride. And I ended up going to Russia anyways and finding, I think, his teammate, this guy named Alexei Veselesrov, and I beat him with a Nogueira, or they called it Nogueira choke, Anaconda choke at the time.
Yeah, it was new at the time.
Yeah, it was brand new. Nogueira was the first one to use it, like a couple months before, and he same thing. He was staring me down, just going like, "I know we're gonna meet." You know, we ended up meeting in the Pride tournament a couple years later. So.
Yeah, dude, that fight you freaking dominated.
Oh yeah, that's probably my best performance, my favorite performance.
Yeah, you were flowing.
Yeah.
You know, you were like
Felt
just
so
a,
good.
a step ahead every single time.
That's right,
And then
that's
you
right.
finished with that one arm choke.
Yeah,
you know?
the one-arm choke. Yeah.
Yeah, and nobody
Yeah.
even and
Nobody had done that.
Yeah, when
before.
Damian Maia did it on Ben Askren, everybody was talking about it, you know. But then you did it like way before.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Oh, I didn't know Damian Maia did it on Askren.
Yeah.
Wow, interesting. Yeah.
See, I remember that one. I didn't remember this one until
That's-
I was like, oh, you know, I'm gonna talk to Dennis. I better watch some of the fights. And
Yeah.
and I was like, holy shit, that's super tight.
Yeah,
And because I
yeah.
heard in another interview you had, you were talking about that you felt like you were in the flow state.
Right, I was. That's one of the few fights where I really felt like I was seeing the opponent move in slow motion. It was incredible. Man, yeah, I could see him move in front of me. I was like, he was doing the moves, throwing things at me, but it just seemed like he was so slow, and I could react way faster. I could hear my coach talking to me. Marcus, my coach, who was cornering me for that fight, even says that's the fight where he was literally yelling instructions, and he feels like he was just controlling me with a remote almost. We were very in sync, you know? Yeah.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, that's like an anime character moment, you know.
That's right.
Everything slows down.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so because as a martial artist myself, that's the state that we chase. you
Right.
know? Yeah.
Right.
And you're lucky to even get one of those.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so as somebody who is such a high level professional and everything, is there anything we can do to kind of make the flow state happen more frequently?
You have to focus. Remember, the flow state is basically, I think, a state of hyper concentration. So concentration means you have zero distractions. You're super focused. That means you're not bothered or distracted by fear or performance anxiety. So how do you get over performance anxiety? You have to do the sport so much that really either you forget about the performance anxiety and it doesn't happen, or you're just used to getting over it. However it is for you, however you look at it. Everybody has a different way of looking at it. And then because you've done the sport so much or that specific activity, you're just so dialed in, it just becomes automatic. I think that's how I was for that fight. I had won, if you look at my record, I'd won so many fights before then. It was like the apex of my win streak, you know? After that fight, I ended up winning again, and then I tore my bicep, and it was just different, you know? Things were a little bit different. But if you look at my career, the trajectory of my big win streak, that was the zenith, you know?
Yeah, because that almost like it's built up to that apex that you
You're
said
right.
as a
You're right.
zenith.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what changed, do you think? Is it, I mean, because I know it's with Akihiro Gono, right? When you tore the bicep.
Well,
was that the catalyst, or do you think there's something bigger that kind of happened? Right? Can you tell like something is off, or?
Oh no, I think at that time I ended up going through some personal things. I had a tragedy happen very close to me, which threw me off definitely. And then the fight with Gono was fine. I beat him, but I tore my bicep. Like I got a hole in my bicep here. I never had it fixed. It's fine anyways.
It just makes you look more shredded. Right?
Yeah, exactly. I just got to have a t-shirt hanging down on it. But if the t-shirt rolls up, you can see I look like I have a melted bicep. But it works just fine. Anyways, so yeah, I won that fight with Gono. I tore my bicep, and I ended up coming back to fight against Mizaki, who had lost his first match, but the guy who beat him, Paulo Filho, pulled out.
Right. Which conspiracy theory, blah blah blah. But
yeah, I heard that too. But who knows? I mean, whatever. They did have an alternate, which I think was Hector Lombard or Gegard Mousasi. I can't remember. One of the two. But yeah, it ended up being Mizaki, and it was tough. It was hard. Like, I ain't gonna lie, man. 2 15-minute fights in one night.
Yeah.
The hardest thing I've done in my life. Yeah. I was so dehydrated after that when I went to the bathroom, it's going to sound gross, but I went to relieve myself in the urinal. My urine was brown. I was so dehydrated. Like my kidneys were just squeezed, you know? Because remember, the weight class in Pride was 83 kilos, which is now 185, which was what I was accustomed to fighting at, middleweight in UFC. It's 182.6. So it was an even lower weight class.
Yeah.
So it was hard to make that weight.
And all the casuals are gonna say, it's only 3 pounds, man. But dude,
no, man, it's not. So it's the last 3 pounds, right? When you've already cut like 14, 15 pounds, you know? It's not the first 3 pounds. Yeah, 3 pounds is hard.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. The last 3 pounds is like 10 pounds for real, you know?
Right.
Like,
right. Must crack you up so much reading some of the comments from like people who don't even fight.
yeah, it's pretty funny, but you got to take it in stride, you know?
Sure. They pay the bills, right?
Right,
And,
that's it.
yeah.
That's it. That's it, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where were we?
We're talking about the fights in Pride, the tournaments.
Yeah,
the fight with Gono.
Right.
So,
yeah. So have
flow state.
Flow state, yeah. So have you ever been back there?
I have in training. right? But that's a different situation because you don't have the same, distractions than a normal. I will say this: before fighting, it's gonna sound funny because it's a completely different context, but I did experience a kind of flow state. I'll tell you the story. When I was young, when I was a teenager, I used to love going to the arcade, right? Back then there was arcades, right? This is like mid 90s. I used to love a game called Street Fighter 2.
Yes.
Fighting game,
Yes,
right?
I've spent many a
Yeah,
quarter
exactly.
with the
Me too.
machine.
So, and then I would play. I was not bad at it, nothing special, but I would love competing against my friends, right? But a couple times I played with my Walkman on, with music playing, and I just I zoned out completely and just focused on the match. Automatic, barely thinking, and I beat like so many people in a row because I had my Walkman on. So I had kind of I want to say like an experience to draw upon. You know what I mean? I wanted to reach that zone again because that was the ultimate state for performance.
Gotcha.
You know? So I mean, it's a little different because it was a video game and it was because I had something covering my ears, but it was more or less the same, the same situation. It was, super performance with, hyper concentration kind of thing.
Yeah, so I think the most important thing is which fucking song were you listening to?
Yeah, exactly, right? Bring it back.
Yeah,
Yeah,
remember,
90s rap, right? Tribe Called Quest or something, NWA, I don't know, something like that. That's what I was listening to at the time.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah.
Nice, man.
It was a Walkman. I know that. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. People, do you even know what a Walkman is?
Yeah, a cassette tape.
Cassette tape. Yeah. Sometimes when the rewind, you don't have anything to rewind back in the days. You have to like.
That's right. You got to stick your pencil in there.
Then roll it yourself.
Yeah. And sometimes you do it the wrong way and everything
comes out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then cassette tapes. Remember, they were trying to not let you copy their tapes.
Yeah, so they put that little plastic thing.
So they have like, but all you have to do is tape over it again.
Yeah, or put a piece of paper in it with tape. Yeah.
Man. Yeah, it's just stupid shit like that. But that's.
And to get back to BJJ, the beginning of BJJ was all about tape training back then in the 90s and early 2000s, right? Because like BJJ instructors were not, so spread out and just so there wasn't so many of them. There wasn't YouTube back then, so you had to learn. If you were far away and there was no good BJJ schools, you had to order videotapes, right, and learn from that. Some of them were good, some of them were bad, and you could lend them to your friends.
Where do you even find those videotapes?
You would order them in magazines, in the internet too, right? The internet still exists, they're just not with like YouTube form, right?
Right.
You ordered it, but then some people would order them and keep them as a secret weapon because they knew if they lent them out, people would make copies because you could copy any tape on your own if you had two VCRs, right? And some people didn't like that because they paid for them. Like I think the first really good set, well, the first popular set was the Gracie one. Then after that, there was this guy named Pedro Carvalho. I don't even know if he's still around. And then after that, there was the Mario Sperry. He is.
Yeah.
Another
legend.
Yeah, and then it cost like $300 for instead of like 6 or 7 tapes.
Wow, so
there's a lot of money back then.
So that's like $600 in today's money.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of that, then, what do you believe is still? It's probably not the case anymore, right? Because back then, as you said, right, if you find some, secret techniques that nobody else knows, then you can make it work and beat some people, right? Does that still work now? Can you? I mean, if somehow you stumble across a technique that nobody's ever seen, I know unlikely, but let's say if that happens, do you think just because people are focused more on conceptual learning and stuff like that, that people won't be defeated by a secret technique as easily?
No, I think the difference now is people, whether it's MMA or BJJ, people realize now, I do anyways, I think most people do, that anything can work. You just have to practice it enough and believe it, right? I mean, there was at the beginning of MMA, people thought kicks were bullshit. You just needed a bit of boxing and grappling. There was a time in BJJ where people thought, leg locks don't work. They're crap, But now it's different. You just have to practice it enough and understand it so that you can really specialize in any one thing and be good at it, right? I mean, the sport has we've seen a lot of, like, remember Sakuraba was his Kimura from the back? When someone, like, people thought that move would never work.
And then
he ends up getting Hoyler, Gracie, and Henzo in it.
Yeah.
You know?
Breaking Henzo's arm.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, and then you get, you know, people thought that leg locks don't work. They're just for beginners. But then you get guys just specializing in them, like Danaher guys, you know? So, yeah, no, anything can work now, right? And people are looking for that next level move to catch people off guard, right? Because, like, perfect example, the buggy choke, you know? Like, it was a brand new thing. A lot of people are getting caught in it because nobody knew how to defend it. But then it kind of seems phased out almost now because people know how to defend it easier, right? But it was hot for a bit when it first happened, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, that's true, because that is pretty recent.
Yeah, it is.
It's just in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. So if you're looking at the jiu-jitsu evolution right now, right? Because you don't want to be the person to be chasing, right? You want to be the person that's leading to get the next evolution. So you have the edge, right? So what do you see that the next one that for people to focus on?
It's hard to say. I don't know. I think it's hard to say, man. I mean, who knows? All it takes is just one person to come out with a new move, and then everybody's doing it on Monday, you know? Like on the weekend, there'll be like a who's number one, or somebody will catch somebody in some kind of setup, a pass, or some kind of defense or setup, and then everybody wants to practice it because it's all over the internet,
Right.
you know? Yeah, it's hard to say what the next big thing is, man. It could be anything. It could be anything, really.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but looking back in throughout your MMA career, right? As you said in the beginning, people are like, hey, leg kicks. But why would you do
Even
leg
high
kicks,
kicks. People thought high kicks didn't work.
Yeah,
you know?
you're just gonna get dumped or
exactly.
or get taken down or something.
Yeah.
Right? So what were some other examples that you have seen that kind of make people question what really works and what doesn't?
In jiu-jitsu?
In MMA, let's say. Yeah.
In MMA, well, I mean, just like leg locks in MMA, people thought really wouldn't work. But I mean, guys like Ryan Hall proved that if you're good enough at it, you can make it work. You know, Damian Maia with his pure jiu-jitsu approach, you know, kind of old school approach. The first guy to, you know, like if you're going way back now and you look at guys like Maurice Smith, he was the first guy to beat a grappler. And at the time, jiu-jitsu was killing everybody. Like if it was a kickboxer versus a jiu-jitsu guy, the jiu-jitsu was winning maybe 100% of the time. And Maurice Smith was the first one to beat Conan Silveira. Then you had guys like Pete Williams beating Mark Coleman with a high kick, same thing, right? You know, and then in jiu-jitsu, I mean, Gordon Ryan, when he was got beat by Vinny Magalhães, you know, he just with simple top position basics, keeping his head in the middle. At the time, Gordon Ryan was more of a leg lock guy, I believe, you know, and then he changed his style and became more of a top player himself, right? And then Vinny Magalhães himself got beat by Craig Jones by a leg locker, by leg locks. And, you know, that was hard to watch.
And a bad break.
Yeah, sure, very hard. Yeah, very bad. Yeah, you know, so it comes around, man. It's hard to say that any one thing is going to be, it is the dominant one, because people will always work hard to beat that one thing.
Right.
You know, and that's what makes the sport evolve. Just like, I'll just use myself as an example, but I think it applies to everyone. I've had hundreds of my favorite submissions because at the time that's what worked for me. But then my sparring partners just caught on with it. My favorite kimura or arm drag or arm bar setup. But then my sparring partners caught on and it wouldn't work anymore. So I had to evolve, you know, and get on with new things. And I think it applies to everybody. I'm sure it's happened to you when training, you know? You just kind of adapt your style to whatever is good at the moment, right?
Yeah. So what is your favorite submission at the moment?
At the moment, probably the head and arm choke.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm always a big kimura person. You know, I got strong arms, and then a big omoplata fan. You know, I got bad wrists, so I can't really do any crazy guillotines. Even the head and arm choke or the rear naked choke, it's hard for me to grab my arm. My arm is really hard, so I end up doing a lot of like leg submissions or using my legs to lock people up from the bottom, like omoplata sweeps, triangle chokes, you know. And then on top, you know, I'm more of a kimura and arm triangle choke.
Nice,
right?
nice.
Yeah.
That is tight. Yeah, because omoplata is almost like a position that not a lot of people focus on.
You don't see it that much anymore, but I love it. I think it's a great move. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, what is your favorite setup to get to the omoplata?
I like to do it from like a kind of a clamp guard modification, right? I've got a bit of a not unique approach, but I learned it from when I was training at American Top Team. There were so many black belts down there. It was easy to pick up on new techniques. You know, you got to have really good wrist control and climbing on the back. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice, dope. And what is your least favorite jiu-jitsu position to get stuck in?
In a guillotine. Yeah. You know, no, the worst is when you work hard to shoot a takedown and you fall right into a guillotine, because the hard work of the takedown kind of puts you half out of breath.
Right.
And then being caught in a choke when you're already half out of breath, it's like so hard, right? If I'm right now super relaxed and you can put on a choke, I'll be relaxed just getting out of it. You know, I'm breathing fine. But if you're already kind of half out of breath, your oxygen level is already low. And then they put on a choke, like, oh my God, it makes it even hard, you know, even harder, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it makes you feel like, man, I put myself here, man.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Ooh, so if you're not, so here's a hypothetical question, right?
Yeah.
Let's say if you're not fighting and if you're not coaching, you know, MMA and jiu-jitsu right now,
Right.
what would you be doing?
Playing video games, watching MMA or jiu-jitsu stuff, sending it to myself so I remember it. I still love the sport, right? So I'm always watching it on social media, or, you know, going out with my girl to restaurants, things like that. Just regular stuff.
Nice.
Watching movies, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So
it.
yeah. So right now your focus is solely on on growing the gym and
Yeah,
being
on
immersed
coaching.
in
On coaching. I've stopped competing, but I haven't stopped training, and I haven't stopped being in the sport. You know, I'm a lifelong martial artist, I'm proud to say. It's something that I will always be doing, I think. You know, there was a time period when I stopped fighting where I questioned whether I was still into the sport, but I think it was just a matter of me stopping to compete and just stay in the sport through coaching and, you know, just training and things like that, right?
Yeah. Because I think I heard again from another podcast
It's okay.
that you tried getting a regular job,
Right.
And then
Yeah.
you instantly regret it.
Horrible.
Yeah.
The worst decision ever, you know, because again, I'm going back to what I just said. It was at a time of my life where I thought that that's what I had to do logically. I stopped competing. I had to do something else, close that chapter of my life. And, you know, but no, I needed to do MMA. I needed to somehow be connected to the sport.
Yeah, because the way I look at it, right? It's equivalent of your MMA is
Right.
equivalent of going to school and
Yeah.
then get your PhD.
That's right.
in
University.
something- Yeah. No, not even university.
It's
PhD level. Now
Sure.
you're a fucking professor.
Yeah,
And now all of a
that's
sudden,
right.
just because I'm not competing, I have to get
Yeah.
rid of all that and say, hey, now that chapter is done.
Yeah.
No. You put in the sweat, the blood and tears.
You're absolutely
so now
right.
you can bring it to the next generation.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
so
right.
That's the logical progression.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm glad that you didn't, stick
Me
with a
too.
with a
Me
different
too.
job, man.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah. So what? But just out of curiosity, though, what kind of job did you try to
Oh,
get?
I had a couple different ones. The main one where I was working for a company doing fiber optic installation at the airport and in office buildings
I cannot picture
downtown.
that, man.
It sucked because, like, I think I was like mid or late 30s at the time. You know, when we were at the airport, I had to wear a reflector vest and a hard hat and walk around. And then sometimes, like, the crew boss or the crew leader was a guy that was younger than me, some guy in his 20s, barely knew the job and got the position because his mom knew the boss or something, you know, and he was barking orders. It was horrible. And I'm like, man, I've put in all this work into MMA and jiu-jitsu, and here I am just starting from zero again, you know? And it's also the people that I was working with, it was a whole other world.
Yeah.
I had nothing in common with them, you know? They were looking at me like I was an alien, you know, just talking about MMA or jiu-jitsu. Like, it was just, I was not fitting in, you know?
Yeah.
You know, but I had to do it to really know what I was missing and how lucky I was to be able to do MMA and Jiu-Jitsu every day. Because honestly, it is not a job for me. I mean, it is a job, but it doesn't feel like a job. It's literally what I love to do. It's literally my passion, you know? I love just watching it every day, whether it's gi jiu-jitsu, no gi jiu-jitsu, MMA, boxing, Muay Thai, kickboxing, wrestling, all the combat sports I love.
Yeah.
You know, and I love to coach it, to make someone get better at it, whether you're a beginner or a competitor.
Yeah. So what's the big plan? What's next for Pinnacle MMA?
Just coach. We've had a very good year with guys fighting in BFL, which is the local MMA organization, as you know.
Battlefield League.
That's right. And now we're starting to push more for our students to compete, you know. So that's it, man. Just coach and keep making the guys better. Yep.
Yeah. So there you go, guys. So make sure to come in and train at Pinnacle MMA if you're thinking about MMA, thinking about jiu-jitsu, or just want to come and talk to this awesome guy. Yeah. So before we stop and wrap it up, anything else you want to anything else you want to plug? Anything else you want to tell people about what's going on?
Yeah, if you want to come train with us, we're at Pinnacle MMA in Richmond. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm at This is Denis Kang on Instagram. This is Denis Kang, and that's it.
Nice, yeah. And we're gonna have all that information in the show notes. Make it easier for you to follow this guy. All right, and thank you guys so much. And that's another Way of BJJ podcast. And again, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
All right, and we'll see you next time.
All right, man, that was great. Yeah.